Welcome to Exposing Deathcare, a podcast created to shine a light on the hidden, often dark realities within the funeral industry. I'm your host, Em, and each episode we bring you real stories from those who have experienced the best and worst of this hidden world. This podcast is a platform to expose unethical practices, harmful experiences, and shady dealings that have plagued grieving families, funeral staff, and the industry as a whole. By bringing these stories to light, Exposing Deathcare aims to push for transparency, support those affected by trauma, and encourage necessary reforms in the way deathcare operates. By bringing these stories to light, Exposing Deathcare aims to push for transparency, support those affected by trauma, and encourage necessary reforms in the way deathcare operates. From documentaries to dramatizations, what's fact, what's fiction, and what are they still not telling you? Listener discretion is advised. The stories shared in this podcast at times may be anonymous to protect the individuals involved. Thank you for listening, and we hope that by sharing these stories we can work together to improve the deathcare industry for everyone involved. As we begin, I want to let you all know that in this episode, I'll be reading from a transcript provided by the podcast software that I utilize to record the interviews. The individual I talked to chose not to have their voice aired directly, and I fully support that. In their workplace and community, there is a real fear that speaking out, especially about the problems in the industry, can get you blacklisted. I didn't feel that the voice altering tools I had access to would offer enough protection. So in order to share their story safely and respectfully, I'll be voicing their words myself. So this is still their story in their words. Please listen with care. And we're back for another episode of Exposing Deathcare, the podcast. So today we have a guest that's going to go by A, and I will get the conversation going right away. How did you get into the funeral industry? What inspired you? Well, I first became interested with the funeral industry when I was in my senior year of high school. I just randomly found out about mortuary signs on the internet, and I looked into the career, looked at the schools, and then I went to my teacher, and he just said, that's the job for you. And no one was really shocked that that was what I wanted to do, because I, just from a young age, was always interested in odd things. I always grew up being very fascinated by death and dying. I never understood why, but once I got into the field, I started realizing my purpose with it and my interest. Growing up, I grew up in a very poor neighborhood. I was surrounded by very tragic deaths and what I know now as abnormal grief. So I just always felt that there was more that I could do with my community and with people with similar backgrounds as myself, and especially with decedent care. That's encouraging to hear. Are you still working in the funeral industry? I was finishing up school, but I'm taking a break and I have plans to go back. How long did you work and in what capacity? Like, what was your job title? I'm relatively new. I have about 2 years of experience, and I started off as a student intern. So tell me, what was the training like? I've heard different things from different people, and it really depends on, I guess, the facility or the coworkers that you have or the protocols that are in place. How did you feel about your training? My training was horrible. It could barely be called training. I was basically thrown into the mortuary and left alone. Many of my coworkers just simply did not care about me. They didn't care that I was a student or that I was learning. They had no care about me and my interest for the field. When I did receive instruction, it was wrong. When I interacted with my supervisor, she would just tell me that I had made a mistake. A lot of my training was done by simply me watching others and also by doing the work that they didn't want to do. When I did ask questions, I was given very vague responses, or I was just simply met with hostility. This sounds pretty common, honestly, which is not a good thing, especially when we're trying to embrace new blood into the industry, alas. So Were you working for a big facility or a small facility? What can you tell me? It would be considered a big company, yes. All right. And what was your pay if you're comfortable answering? This is more or less likely to expose the poop pay that some people have reported receiving. For a student, I think my pay was decent. I started at $21 an hour, but as you moved up, you were given more opportunity with pay, but it stopped at $22.50 an hour. I guess it's certainly not a livable wage this day and age. So do we want to dive in? Let's see. We're not gonna disclose the facility, blah 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 blah. Let's see. Well, take it away and tell us what story is eating at you. I actually became interested in sharing my story because this company and the specific location have been in the news. Something similar actually happened to my family when I was still working for them. A family member had passed away, and we went to make arrangements. She had already made her own. She had bought a crypt, and so when it came time to go check her spot, the counselor just seemed to be confused and was not able to find her specific location. I was looking too because I had previously been allowed to work services with that company. So I just figured it out, and I saw two names that were the same last name, and I'm guessing the husband, he was above his wife in the space. Next to his wife was empty. So I thought that I think they made a mistake here and they placed that person in my loved one's space. I was unsure, and the counselor, he kept pretending like he didn't know. He took out his phone and he's calling records, it's very quiet, and my mom starts asking me, "What's going on?" And I said, "I think they put the wrong person in the wrong space." And so he comes out and says, "Nothing to worry about. It seems the plaque was placed on the wrong crypt, but I can assure you that your loved one is where they're supposed to be." But we never got that reassurance. Well, you're not alone. I pulled up a few news stories while we were talking. Here's one out of California that mirrors that mix up. Mr. D has sued blank and blank for fraud, breach of contract, negligence, and negligent infliction of emotional distress, and is seeking compensatory and punitive damages according to a lawsuit obtained by People. Back in 2008, Mr. D's parents purchased two burial plots at the cemetery. In 2012, he allegedly requested that they release their two plots to allow for the family to have a total of 6 burial plots in the same area, and he went on to secure the 4 additional burial plots, the legal document claims. When Mr. D's mother died in 2021, she was buried in one of the purchased plots a month later. Then in September, the complaint claims Mr. D entered into a contract to get a headstone, but the legal document alleges that the one bearing his mother's name was ultimately placed on the wrong burial site. Per the lawsuit, Mr. D and his family were unaware of this misplacement and continued to visit the incorrect site. When Mr. D's dad died earlier this year in April, the complaint claims that the man and his family made arrangements for their late father to be buried in the adjacent plot next to where they believed their mother to be. However, during the service for his father, the legal document claims that Mr. D was informed that while his mother was correctly buried in her designated plot, the headstone bearing her name had been placed on a different gravesite. Mr. D, the complainant, claims, was shocked, devastated, and overwhelmed upon learning the family had been grieving and visiting the wrong site for approximately 4 years. Per the legal document, promised that the issue would be corrected, and the cemetery subsequently removed the incorrectly placed headstone and placed it on the correct site. This ordeal caused Mr. D significant emotional distress, including shock, grief, and ongoing mental anguish from having grieved and visited the wrong site for his mother. It added that he also suffered economic losses, emotional distress, and other damages as a direct result of the alleged mix-up. When she passed, I thought, at least we have given her a peaceful place to rest, but seeing her memorial tablet placed on the wrong grave felt like losing her all over again, Mr. D's family told the outlet. We're just talking to an empty spot. This cemetery did not respond to people's request for comment. What I personally experienced working in corporate funeral entities that you had the cemetery attached is that there's a lot of CYA, cover your ass. Um, there are multiple reports on Google of cemetery markers being in the wrong place. And there's a bunch of different articles that you can find. My experience as a funeral director is that when you're working with an outside cemetery or a cemetery that is attached to your facility, you always want to go out and make sure the right grave is marked. That's the funeral director's job. Obviously, before you even drive to the cemetery the next day for the burial, that's kind of the protocol. When you're working with a corporate cemetery, though, that has like the cemetery and the funeral home sometimes attached, typically the salespeople are the ones that are going to go out and handle all of that because they've got funeral directors with their whole other lists of things to do. These corporations separate these jobs out. So you've got a salesperson that's meeting with families and going out to pick cemetery plots, and then you have a funeral director handling the decedent's end. We also have a story that I found on Reddit that was deleted. But the gentleman posted that he noticed that his family spot was in the wrong location. He walked over to the excavator to ask what he thought they could do as they dug the wrong plot, obviously. And the excavator said, "Well, that's the only plot that was marked in the entire cemetery." So then that person had to call the city guy. And then the city guy forgot that the burial would be occurring and marked the wrong grave. It's just a lot of people's different hands this has to pass through sometimes. And if you're dealing with an in-ground spot or a mausoleum that requires a bit of scheduling and manpower if the body is actually placed in the wrong grave, which I can see why they wouldn't want to tell you that. Oh no, it's just the marker. It's just the marker. It's totally fine. Thank you. I was with the company at the time, and so I had the opportunity to shadow these counselors when they would meet with families, and they were completely unaware of what they were doing. I remember asking one of them, you know, "How did you get into the field, or how did you become interested in this job?" And she simply said, "Well, I used to sell cell phones, and this was the next big thing that we can make good money at." So a lot of these counselors don't even understand what they're doing. It's all about selling a spot and making commission, and that's it. And to clarify, these are facilities like the funeral homes that typically have a cemetery attached. They have the family with the salesperson, and then the family service counselor, whoever they're discussing, and then they go with them first, pick out the plot of land, and then they talk to the funeral director. That was the experience that families were given where you were working at. Yes. So it was completely different from what I was learning in school. And so it was shocking to see it happen, but it was worse when it happened to my family. Okay. I think that's something that they ought to address in the school. Like in my education, which was a lot further along ago than yours, I've noticed not a lot has changed. They teach us in school how to operate and what to expect if you're working with a family owned firm. But what they weren't doing and what they may not still be doing is giving you the tools and the hierarchy and the structure to survive in a corporate or conglomerate setting. Am I right? Yes. When I started school, I initially wanted to work for a mom and pop funeral home, but it's quite difficult to find one that isn't owned by a larger corporation. The company I ended up with was kind of a last minute thing, and they made big promises and they sold us on their brand. Yeah. So once I was working with them and this incident happened, where you start off with the company and you're made aware of the rules, right? And so I thought, I can't say anything. I know that this is wrong. And I don't know if I can go to school and tell my professors that they're actually putting the wrong person in my loved one's space. And I certainly couldn't go to my supervisor to tell her that to complain because I feared that I would lose my job or I would be blacklisted. And I would often hear about that in Mortuary. If anybody speaks up, you're blacklisted. Yes, say that again. Say it again. What happened? Yes, you often hear that people are blacklisted for speaking up. I am living proof of that. Yeah. I feel like I am blacklisted too because my experience was just horrible with the company. And I know other people who have worked with the same company who just, it wasn't great. And then you're seen as crazy because you actually want to speak up about what's right and what you're viewing as wrong. When the recent news story came out and I read it, it brought back that incident for me. And I'm glad the family is speaking up and doing something about it. I'm glad that the news, like the news stations, are picking up on this story and they are highlighting this cemetery and funeral home. Because when you work for a company, you see that the brand and the money comes first and everyone else is last. They genuinely don't care about families. They simply just care about selling death and selling real estate. Yes, that's exactly what it is. And you said something just now and a little bit earlier in our interview that really resonated with me. They're putting the brand before the family and before everyone else. So something about the brand is more important to these entities. And I'm seeing that too. Whether it's this one or the other ones that you've got brands coming up and buying the smaller funeral homes and they're nestled under this one big brand, whether it's da 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 or da 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 or da da da, whoever else, all the big dogs, the big evil empires, I'll just call them because branding's been the next big deal for a while. Like, I accidentally branded myself the modern mortician before social media branding really became a thing. And then all of a sudden, all these funeral publications are coming out and saying, build your brand, build your brand, build your brand. And it just makes you wonder if we're just now getting eyes and ears on stories like this or how often things like this are happening and being shielded. So in regards to bodies being placed in the wrong spots, I can tell you that it's happened in small town cemeteries too, because I have worked for smaller homes in smaller cemeteries in smaller counties and even in the medium cemeteries. It can happen really anywhere. Um, what I see it is a lack of follow through. When you have too many chiefs running the show and not enough workers to actually be communicating, that's where things kind of fall apart. And the whole initial design of a funeral director or mortician was to be the one-stop shop from beginning to end. That's why they started as cabinet makers and they put it all underneath one roof to make it easier for people. But what they've done over the years is they've added more moving pieces, and the business or the industry itself has lost sight of the importance of what we do and what we are designed to do. And instead, it's become about making the most money you can off of each individual case. Yeah, and I will say that I do agree with you. I will add that I also believe that these companies, these businesses are placing people who don't know what they're doing in places of importance. They see easy money, they go for it. The majority of supervisors I came in contact with, maybe perhaps when they started off, they were interested and had good intentions, but eventually they buy into the corporate look and lifestyle and they lose all interest for even their employees. That's specifically another problem that was occurring in the location that I worked at. It's the supervisors who create a hostile work environment, who encourage employees to sell out and backstab each other. And so it's like you're in a cult. You can't, you got to watch yourself all the time. If something wrong happens, you can't speak up because who knows, maybe your coworker will tell the supervisor, and there you go. You're blacklisted. I know that. I mean, I had a horrible time at that place. And like I said, school, I don't know if schools are made aware of what is going on in these locations or where they're sending their students to. I actually put in a complaint with my professors about my location, but I don't know if anything happened or if anything was ever said. It was just, it's disappointing. As someone that's just starting off, I just feel like, in my experience, yeah, this experience just left me drained. Totally the wrong impression. Yeah. I think the schools are aware of what's going on, but I think that the people that are in a position to make decisions at the school, not necessarily just the teachers, but people higher up, they have these relationships that they have with these other entities. Like, I'm going to throw one under the bus because I know from my experience when I went there, Dallas Institute of Funeral Service, when I went to that school, it was owned by Pierce Chemicals. So obviously their drive is to teach you as much as they can about services involving the chemicals and the different things like that. Those people were in places of power, mostly because of like who they married or the job that they took. I can imagine that's what it would be like across the whole educational platform for the funeral industry, except maybe now that more community colleges are involved. I don't know. I don't know. Um, I'm going to go with this is the big entities. They can make or break a school with their reputation or funding. Things like participation, they can make or break a school. So the school is actually going to do, are they actually going to do anything about it when they get complaints from the students that are working at these places? I would hope that they would take things like that seriously, but how many students are actually speaking up and relaying information from what they're seeing instead of just disappearing into the ether and giving up? I almost did that. I know that people, whoever listened to this, they're going to know what I'm talking about and probably pinpoint where I went to school and work. But that specific company recruits the majority of its students directly from the school. And it's almost like they're hoarding the students. They promise a lot of things they don't deliver, and then they simply just get rid of these students. And while you're there, you can't speak up. So you're going through your whole 3 semesters of school just being drained by this company, by these supervisors, by these employees. And then you're out and you're done with school and it's too late to actually complain and warn future students. And that's exactly what happened to me. I was there and I would sometimes, talk to other coworkers who were experiencing similar things. And we just felt like there was nothing we could do, especially when the higher ups are the ones who want to create that environment. I guess I'm lucky too that I got to experience such a horrible environment and also to meet a lot of big names in this industry when I did. So it's easier for me to pinpoint things that are wrong and to warn others about people in the industry who do not want the good for everyone. I was fortunate enough to work with an influencer and to see exactly the environment that they create. It was quite nasty. And so it's just difficult for the public to understand that these things go on inside. They see the representatives like, the influencers online, and they think it's very interesting and it's cool, but they don't know what's going on behind closed doors. And a lot of us students, we get to experience that firsthand, and then we just don't know what to do with that information. I'm really sorry to hear that. We just talk amongst each other and complain, but that's about it. Like, nothing can be done. So back when the morticians started popping off on TikTok, I was one of the first that was on Instagram. I'll stand back by that to the day that I die. It was me, Caleb Wild, Little Miss Funeral, The Grave Woman, Caitlin Doty, Girl with a Mortuary Report. We were the pioneers on Instagram. So when TikTok started popping off, I was paying attention to the funeral-related people on there. And of course, you've got the Epic Hollis Funeral Home. She's an excellent example of the good way to use social media and Deathcare. Melissa, the funeral babe, also on the East Coast, is another really good one. There were some other ones that were really good coming online. I would interact with them and I'd be like, hey, I'm worried about you. Be careful about what you're putting online because you'll become a target in some of these Facebook groups. Really just trying to look out for these other individuals as they're going online and putting themselves out there, because I've been beat up like constantly by others in the field. So anyway, it hurt my feelings. Like, yeah, I was right about some of them. Some of them did get attacked pretty badly, but yeah. I had actually heard about you in the mortuary that I worked at. I'd heard your handle be thrown around sometimes. And so I started following you because I do believe that I'm very interested in your take on the industry and I really respect it. But yeah, what a lot of people see online is not really how it goes. These influencers, the ones that I have met and the ones that I worked with, like a post about Mortician's Day or something, and it was a very nice post showing appreciation for everyone. But that's never shown inside the mortuary. Like, they'll post it online, but their behavior doesn't reflect what they're posting. Like that person along with their friends, they create the worst environment to work in and then constantly try to push people out. And I think that's another big problem in the industry that once you have your 2 years or you become licensed, you think you're better than the ones that are just coming in. But we all basically start in the same spot. And it's just really disappointing to see that a company can influence you that much and make you think that not everyone is worthy of learning. And yeah, just from my experience, I felt the way I was asking and asking questions, and for mentors, they just didn't want to answer because they didn't see me as worthy of one of the company titles and wares of the brand. But I guess they also just didn't want me and others to be the same as them. They just didn't see us as equals. Oh, yeah, it's very clicky. I've experienced that. It's like on Wednesdays, we wear pink. I actually worked for a budget crematory, we'll call them that, where the owner would say that on Wednesdays we wear pink because he's such an asshole to people online. He would tear people down, other companies online. He'd tear them down in person. He'd attack their employees. Like the funeral industry has just openly become incredibly toxic. And I think it stems from the good old boys not wanting to allow others in. And this started 20 years ago when women started to dominate the industry by going to school more than the men, et cetera, and so forth. And these old boomers, they're getting in these grumpy old Facebook groups. They have set the pace basically for the corporate culture. It's just toxicity is rampant in the industry and we're experiencing it. So again, this is what this podcast exists, is for others in the industry to know that if they're experiencing this, they're not alone. We are all noticing it. It's just not being talked about, just like this podcast. So if we can get these pieces of communication going, hopefully we can make it better and shine light on some of this stuff. I do hope that it'll get better. I know that, well, if I may, my friends and I actually started a blog to also, in our way, expose these experiences, but to educate the public on the funeral industry. We want students to also hear our stories because we know a lot of them can sympathize with us. We also believe that colonization has a big part to do in the toxicity that exists in the Western funeral industry. We want to bring in more Indigenous people, more people of color, and also want people to know that they have nothing to prove just because of the boomer white men setting the standards for what we have to do now. It doesn't mean we have to play by their rules. We don't have to prove anything to them. And I think once we realize that, maybe the toxicity will start going away. Once we start including different voices, I think things will get better, especially at some of these larger businesses, which could always be setting the example for everyone else. So, to circle back on something that I thought about before we close it up, if a big entity like that can make such a small mistake as placing a marker in the wrong place, what do you think about their ability to keep cremated remains organized? I don't know. I want to believe that there is due diligence, but it's a big mistake to place a marker in the wrong spot. So I don't know. I want to believe that, yeah, it's a hard question. And especially when, the Mortician, the HBO documentary just came out. It's stuff like that. It just makes you wonder. Good answer. Well, since you brought it up, we'll go ahead and touch on that one for just a second. If you haven't seen or heard of it yet, The Mortician is a docuseries, 3 episodes on HBO Max. The first one is out the beginning of June 2025. The next 2 episodes will drop throughout that month. The behavior of the man and his cohorts. Oh my gosh. I have seen that attitude in other general professionals in my career. Have you? Yes, unfortunately, I have. Like, I'm not saying that they did the same thing as this guy, but it's the attitude, the absolute disregard for someone's loved one, the lack of ethics, the dollar over the human. Um, so yeah, let's keep talking about these things. Hopefully the media will continue to pay better attention to things like this and we can get a better handle on what's happening behind the scenes of end of life care. I agree. Anything else you want to cover before we close? I was fortunate enough, I want to share this story, uh, to also care for My loved one, the same person that I was discussing earlier, from the moment they got to the mortuary, I was there with them and I was able to wash them, bathe them, and dress them and casket them. It was a privilege to do it, and I'll always hold on to that memory. It reminds me of how important it is for us to take care of our dead and be involved with death. Did you get to do the removal or the bathing? What do you feel comfortable sharing? Yes, well, I was present for the removal and I was notified when she arrived to the mortuary. I was able to ask a friend at the time. They were embalmed, so I asked, was I able to choose the person? And so I did the majority of the prep after them, and it was beautiful. Yeah, having hands-on is the final act of love. I only hope in the future that more people get that opportunity to experience it if they want to. Thanks again for your time today. I wish you the best in your future's endeavors. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of Exposing Deathcare, the podcast. I truly appreciate your support and the courage of those who have contributed to or shared their stories with us. If you or someone you know has something to share, we encourage you to reach out. You can remain anonymous, and your story could prevent future harm. You can leave comments, ask questions, or provide feedback by connecting with us on social media at Exposing Deathcare on TikTok and Instagram, The Modern Mortician on YouTube, and all streaming platforms. Like, follow, and share. Podcast music titled Exit Strategy by Enlia.